Bart, how is it going today?
Going pretty good, Bradley. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. Sporting a little bit of a cold. Found a little bit of water. We were in the middle of a thaw in Iowa. With
Oh, yeah.
last week we had like 8 inches of snow. Today it was in the 50s. So normal Midwestern weather, all 4 seasons, every day
Well,
or
like
every
I
week.
said, I knocked down when I found out that you were sick. I knocked down my camera resolution from 720p to 480 to make sure I didn't get digital COVID, just in case. I
Right,
had to
right. I know. I
wait a
mean,
minute, there's a germ right there. Oh, I got it. That was a close one.
There we go. That'd be better. Oh man, if this is gonna be a fun talk, let's go ahead and hit that music. Welcome to the Fandemic. This is a podcast about talking to different people, finding out what their fandemic or what their fandemic is, and how we each level up our awesome. With people I may or may not know. I wrote the book on leveling up your awesome. It's true. It's on sale on Amazon right now. Leveling up my awesome. Also check out my other book, The Stuffed Animal Night Force versus the Dream Invaders. Today I have a special guest, the Moon Man himself, filmmaker, writer, conspiracy theorist, someone I'm going to get along great with, Bart Sibreel. I'm sorry, I can't talk today. How are you?
I'm doing good, Bradley. How about yourself?
I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to complain at all. So, uh, tell us, tell
You're
the,
so un-American. You never complain. That's so un-American of you.
like, what is there really to when you come down to it? What's so bad? I woke up today, and I like my job, and today was my day off. I played some video games. I hung out with my kiddo because she's in spring break. I watched a little bit of Star Wars. Can't complain too much. It was a good day.
The scriptures say do everything without complaining. How about that? And so I've been focusing on that this week. When little bumps in the road happen, it's really strange. I don't control the world. It's really
Yeah.
sad, and things don't always go as I plan.
Hmm.
And when that happens, it's like not to be mad and not to take it out on somebody. If you believe in the Messiah, what I'm really God's working on my mind lately is to take you could say the abuse criticism. I know it's on a very subtle psychological degree,
Yeah.
fortunately, compared to what he went through, but to just take it and to not complain. Why did you do that? Why did you do this? Just say, oh, okay, because that's what who would do, right? So,
Right.
it's weird. I'm trying to be one of his followers for many years. I'm just now working on that this week. Somehow that's hit my mind this week, and to just suck it up, and that's what he did. He took
A
the
lot.
abuse that belonged to other people, so I need to do the same. And it's very subtle for me in
Hmm.
life, this and that and the other, and it's without complaining. So there you go. It's it. Everything's in the Bible, isn't it?
It is, at least in some way or another. I always try to look at things better. I never, and I didn't used to be this way, but I always try to be as positive as possible. You know, I when I go to work, I try to give everybody high fives, and sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's really, really hard to have that positive. And I'm gonna, man, okay, that's a little better. But my camera is not liking me. There you go. But being, just try to take things take things as they come. One thing that helped me a lot is my wife battles from depression a lot, and seeing her, like, she just will grab onto something, and I'm in the mind like, okay, it's over and done with. Let's move on. Let's, deal with the outcomes. And she just like, hey, last week, and I'm like, okay, let's talk about it, and let's, until you're safe and you move on. But and one of the next kids book, I have like several kids books that I'm working on right now. One of them is called "Don't Let Today End in a Why, Didn't I?" So that's the one I just finished the prose of it a couple days ago. I'm looking forward to getting that one illustrated. It should be pretty much fun.
Good. Yeah, I think that's good to lay the foundation of the right way of thinking in young people and the best way possible to do that. You have to be creative. So I heard you like games. I don't know if you know this, but if you go to Sibreel.com and you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's a game I invented, and it's called Game of Seven. And when I was reading the book of Revelation one day, I was reading about all the seals, seven plagues, seven spirits of God, seven churches. And I knew that chess and checkers were an 8x8 board. So I thought, well, why not have a board that's 7x7? So I got out an old chessboard and I put a piece of duct tape on the top row and I put a piece of duct tape on the vertical row, and I looked at it. And when you have a 7x7 board, you have a center square. So, which is unique. And so I call that in the game the throne of God. And then kind of the four diagonals around the center square, those four corners are called the gates of heaven. Each person, it's a 2-player game like chess and checkers and backgammon. Each person has 7 pieces, which are angels, and 1 archangel with special powers. And then every time you move, you have to move 7 spaces. So if you roll a 1, you have to move a 1 in one direction, a 90-degree turn either way, and then a 6, always totaling 7. If you roll a 2, you move a 2, a 90-degree turn, and then a 5. So it's a 7x7 board with 7 pieces each that have to move 7 spaces every turn. The game is called 7. And believe it or not, it's completely finished. If you go to Sibreel.com and scroll all the way down to the bottom, you can download the game for free, and it's all cross-platform. You can play it on your iPhone or your Android. You can play Android to iPhone. It's also a Mac desktop, Windows desktop, and Steam. It's free except for Steam. And you can play the computer or you can play anyone in the world. And it's completely done. We've been working on it for years. And it's at gameof7.com or at Sibreel.com. So you should give it a try. It's a strategy game.
I wrote it down. I will definitely be doing that. I'm one of those, like, I'll get to a point, then I'll have to hand it over to my wife and like, can you finish for me? My wife is the super strategy thinker. She loves stuff like that. I'm the go right in, jump in the middle, jump in the deep end of the pool without knowing how to swim and try to figure it out. That's kind of how I learned. But that sounds like I love chess. I haven't played chess in so long, but like as you're saying that, I'm like, wow, yeah, 7 is the number, and that sounds pretty freaking cool. Man, also I will check that out. So Bart, while we're talking about Sibreel.com, tell me about website, tell me about your podcast, tell me about YouTube page. Let's talk about all that stuff.
Yeah, I have a new podcast. I think we're only coming up this week on the 3rd episode. There's actually 2. It's kind of set up into a 5-tier system. And you subscribe. Just go to Sibreel.com. It's my last name, S as in Sam, I-B as in boy, REL.com. I think you have it on the screen. And scroll down just a little bit beneath the book, and you'll see subscribe to Bart's podcast button. You do that. And the first one is called Bart Sibreel's Box Escape, because we have to think outside of the box. So it's kind of a weekly summary of all the alternative media news, what's the most important one for that week, or several we'll focus on. For example, most people in the alternative media know like the moon landings are fake, and they know Oswald didn't kill Kennedy, and they know the little thing that we've been going through for the last 3 years is likely not what they're saying. However, as soon as Chinese balloons are reported, they repeat what the mainstream media is saying day after day, or Putin's the enemy, and U.S. is the hero in the Ukrainian thing. I mean, for all we know, the president of both countries are friends, and the whole thing is staged like a fake wrestling match. We don't really know. We need to make sure that we're not being led astray as the alternative media, because that can happen easily. It's my opinion. And this little thing we've been going through for the last 3 years, seeing how 75% of Americans believe that Oswald did not kill Kennedy. That's a huge portion. 50% think that airplanes did not cause the collapse on 9/11. You see? And then 25% believe the craziest of all conspiracy theories, which ends up being true, that they really did fake going to the moon. Now, that 25% is very vocal. So it's my opinion the CIA-run media often has to have two lies. And the little thing we've been going through for the last 3 years is the perfect example. There's the first lie for the 75% who believe everything they hear on the evening news, which is that this illness came from an animal. Okay. And therefore take the medicine, even though you're not sick. And then for the people who are critical thinking, they say, okay, we're going to let you in our little secret. Okay. It came from a scientific facility, but it's very serious. So also be sure to take the medicine. You see, either way, you take the medicine. And so I believe both are not true. If either was true, they wouldn't have to fake the number of illnesses, and they wouldn't have to fake so many causes of mortality. So the fact that they're doing that is proof that neither is true in my mind. So we have to be aware they're still doing that now. One of the moon landing people, Edgar Mitchell, spent his whole life saying UFOs are real. And he spent his whole life saying the moon landings are real. See, the moon landings and UFOs are probably just as real as one another. They really want us to believe in UFOs for some reason. If you go to Sibreel.com, scroll down about halfway, I wrote an article that took me at least 200 hours to research and write about, are there really aliens from outer space? And many links in it that indicate that that is actually not the case scientifically and proof-wise, that we likely are it in the universe. And it goes into great detail as to how that the opposite of what they're tricking us into believing is true. Now, they could leak out, okay, a general confessed this and so forth, confess this, but that's just plants. I mean, they say a White House source said all the time on the evening news. Well, I mean, come on, they're just passing on a lie, so you do their lying for them. The best liar is someone who thinks it's true, right?
100%. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm saying that's what the podcast is. Sibreel.com, scroll down, subscribe to the podcast. The first one is Bart Sibreel's Box Escape, and it's a weekly summary of what's, not only what really going on. It's like, well, let's weed through the alternative media, which I do during the week. And I'm like, let's see if we can see if they're even correct and think outside the box. The second one is called End Times Church. Basically, when I made the first film, a funny thing happened on the way to the moon, which you can see for free at Sibreel.com. That and Astronauts Gone Wild cost $1 million, which I was given by someone who builds rockets for NASA, who knows it's fake, the moon landings, and he wanted to expose it. So all that to say, when I first made the movie, which took 7 years, I kind of looked at all the films out there that were about the moon landings being fake, and they were mainly kind of like community access TV quality. However, they did have valuable information in them. So I took the good information from all of them, made it professional, and that's what I did with the film. So kind of the same thing is going on with End Times Church. No church is 100% correct, and I believe every church does something right. And for example, a church that's notoriously historically run the world and has known for a lot of certain kinds of abuse, that particular church that I grew up in, even though I don't go there now, it taught me the fear of God. And as you know, it says, I believe in Proverbs, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. So that was a good thing. Then I attended another church, kind of prominent in South United States, and went to church with my girlfriend, who they knew we were sleeping together and never called us on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It says, do not fornicate many times, and if you do, you won't go to heaven. And yet they didn't challenge me. They didn't know to challenge me. They weren't taught to challenge me. They taught love, though. They taught unconditional love, and that's a good thing. So I learned that from them. Then another church, a little bit stricter on Bible interpretation and sin, and in an accurate way, taught me, you need to repent to be saved, and who Jesus was. And it's weird because when I started visiting, it's like, oh, they talk about Jesus every week. At my other church, they talk about Jesus on Christmas and Easter, and so they're like, everything is Jesus. I'm like, oh, how about that? And they also taught evangelism, that if you're not sharing your faith, you're really not a Christian, because that's what it means. And so, but they didn't know about the end times, and they didn't know about certain overlooked 10 commandments that aren't being kept, that somehow one of the 10 is no longer valid, which doesn't make any sense, but the other 9 are, right?
Right.
So I went on. And then that church, I believe, could apply other things in the Bible that they're not doing. And another church that is applying. And then another church that is applying those things is doing things that they shouldn't be doing, that the other church knows not to do. So it's kind of confusing. I remember trying to figure out what church to go to. Okay, you got the Muslims who will not drink, not eat pork, but they will smoke. Then you've got the Jews who will not eat pork, but will drink and will not smoke. Then you got the Mormons who will not drink, not smoke, but will eat pork. Then you have the Seventh-day Adventists who will not eat pork, not smoke, not drink. Then you have the Living Church of God who will not eat pork, not smoke, but will drink. It's like so confusing. So I thought, well, why not get together a church, online church, and maybe in house churches? Why not just start in house churches? The evangelism church I went to, that was very, very biblically accurate, started with 30 people, and they actually set a goal. They said, in 20 years, the 30 of us, let's grow and grow and grow. Teach that if you're not sharing your faith, you're not a Christian, which is true. And let's try to have a church in every country in the world. And 20 years. They did it in 19 years.
That's awesome.
And hundreds of thousands of people. So that is correct. That they got especially right. And if we're living in the last days, which I believe we are, we really need to be sharing our faith unlike any other time in history, because the doors are about to close, and then that's that. And so why not have an internet church? However, it's also, you have to have physical, tangible fellowship. So there's in homes throughout one city, maybe even, or around the world, and people watch the internet presentation, singing or whatever, then they talk about it and have a fellowship meal afterwards. So what I intend to do is kind of like first lay the foundational things that everyone agrees upon that are the most important. And there are things that I believe are not salvation issues. They may be true and someone else may be inaccurate about it, but debating it is not really worth the time. The Bible talks about that too. Do not dispute over words. We need to focus on the most important things. Time is running out. And so first we'll lay a foundation on that. Then why not take the best thing from this church, the best thing from this church, the best thing from this church, combine them into end times church. That's kind of the goal. So basically at that level of subscription, you get everything before it, Bart Sibreel's Box Escape and End Times Church, which is a weekly, more of a Bible point of view message. And then the next tier up, you get the previous two, plus you get to be part of a once a month Zoom call with me and whoever else is at that tier to ask me any questions that you want to. Then a tier above that, you get a one-on-one half an hour with me every month, and then above that, 1 hour once a month. So that's the latest and greatest. And then of course there's the book that came out, Moon Man, The True Story of a Filmmaker on the CIA Hit List, which basically releases for the very first time in the world the actual location where Apollo 11 was filmed, the dates it was filmed, and even the names of 15 people who were there at the time. All of this information came from the chief of security at that particular military base, who on his deathbed confessed that he personally eyewitnessed them filming the fake moon landing at his Air Force Base, Cannon Air Force Base in Clovis, New Mexico. He stood beside President Johnson, who was so curious, he popped in the first 3 days of filming to see it. And he gave this chief of security a list of 15 names, and only these people are allowed in. And so we published that list in the book, and some of these people are still alive. So this is groundbreaking information. We now know where it was filmed, who was there, and it's pretty scary because I was confirming this information with this dead man's son less than 2 years ago.
Wow.
And because I was talking to him on the phone, a few days later, government agents knocked on his door. This is less than 2 years ago.
Wow.
And threatened him face to face with killing him and his family if he ever spoke to me again about the fake moon landings.
Wow. That's awesome.
So
Well,
all this is in my book at Sibreel.com. It's an audio book that I read personally. It's a Kindle book and it's a print book. And it's also interactive. Basically, there are 16 interactive video links in the book. I basically write a chapter and I say, look, go to Sibreel.com, click on the top left button, Moonman video links, and go to link 1 so that you'll know what I'm about to talk about. Let's say people haven't seen a funny thing happen on the way to the moon. That's one of the links. They watch that first. So when I start describing it in the chapter, you know what I'm talking about. And then most of the links are fairly short. We talk about the radiation belt. We go into the radiation levels. These are not made up. They're from NASA. They're from probes. And we have a NASA employee on camera saying that the technology necessary to send an astronaut through the radiation to the moon and back has yet to be invented. So how is it that they went to the moon when the technology to do so wasn't invented yet? You see? And so all this is in the book. And I get so many emails and reviews from people. I used to think the moon missions are real. And when you look at the videos and look at the evidence, there's no way that they were real. And that's the sad fact. It's not a theory. It's not a conspiracy theory that the moon missions were faked. It's an absolute fact. We have 4 undeniable, incontrovertible proofs that the moon missions were fake. And the first is simply the logic that if today, with 5 decades better technology, NASA can only send an astronaut 250 miles into space, which is 1,000th the distance to the moon, how could they 50 years ago on the first attempt with 1/1,000,000th the computing power of a cell phone send astronauts 1,000 times further? That means that there was greater technology in the past than in the future. But that's impossible. That's an historic and scientific impossibility. So what does that mean? It means they faked it. That's what it means. You can't have NASA having 1,000 times farther space traveling capability in 1969 than today. It's a mechanical, scientific, and historic impossibility.
With no video lag.
Yeah. I mean, if they could go to the moon on the first attempt with, our cell phone 50 years ago, we would have been a solar system by now, and there'd be bases all over the moon. But there's none there because it can't be done. I mean, the South Pole has 100-mile-per-hour winds, 100 degrees below zero, and there are bases there because it can be done. Maybe barely, but it can be done. So if you could go to the moon, there would be bases there. There aren't any because it can't be done. And so that's why there's mannequins orbiting the moon in the Artemis mission. Isn't that strange? They have people playing golf and driving cars on the moon in 1969, but 55 years later, they can only send mannequins to orbit the moon and not even land. I mean, that proves it right there. Then the second proof, and I could do a screen share, but it's these shadows that they claim are on the moon in sunlight, and they intersect at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart. Well, that's impossible in sunlight. Just go outside, stand beside your friend on a bright sunny day, and you'll see your shadows never intersect. It's impossible. The sun is so big and so far away, they can't ever intersect. It's not humanly, scientifically impossible. So on this, you can prove the moon landing's fake with one picture of a shadow of an astronaut going at 12 o'clock and a shadow of a rock 5 feet away going at 9 o'clock, 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart. That's impossible to be sunlight, which means it's electrical light, which means they're on Earth. Second proof. Third proof. A funny thing happened on the way to the moon culminates with classified footage we uncovered that when I popped in the tape, it says on the screen, do not show to the public. And it's unedited behind the scenes footage dated by NASA's own atomic clock 2 days into the flight of them using a 1 foot model of the Earth to pretend it's floating in space. The lights come up, it's a 1 foot model, and we have a third track of audio of the CIA telling them how to fake a 4-second radio delay to make it look like they're halfway to the moon when they're still in Earth orbit. We have all that on camera, audibly heard. That's third proof. And then if I saw somebody pull the trigger and kill somebody at a convenience store, my eyewitness testimony is very valuable. It can throw them in jail. So when you have a person on their deathbed saying they eyewitnessed the moon landing fraud, that's serious evidence. And then it gets even worse, okay? This is not in the book because his son was still alive when it was published. But basically, I now reveal the gentleman's name, which was Cyrus Eugene Akers. And this is not in the book. On his deathbed, he actually confessed something else. That was actually more important to him to confess. He's dying. He believes in God. And as best as we can tell, the scriptures say if you confess your sin and renounce them, meaning no intention of doing them again, you will be forgiven. Pretty simple. And yet, how many people do that? How many at-large bank robbers turn themselves in? Never heard it one time. And yet that's all you have to do to live forever. So this guy doesn't. He actually confessed first to murdering somebody. He murdered a friend at Cannon Air Force Base who also eyewitnessed the fake moon landing fraud, who told him that he thought it was morally wrong and he was going to go to a reporter and expose it. We don't know whether President Johnson ordered him to kill him or whether he took that as his own initiative as the chief of security at Cannon Air Force Base. But he did kill him. He said so. Now, when you're dying, you don't make up, oh, I murdered somebody. Okay? And then he went on to say the reason why he killed him was to cover up the moon landing fraud, which was filmed June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968 at Cannon Air Force Base at Clovis, New Mexico. And sure enough, before this investigation started, Cannon Air Force Base website boasted it had President Johnson pay him a visit in 1968. And then one of the people on this list that President Johnson gave him of these VIP visitors only are allowed to go in, which we published in the book. You know, half or a third of them are still alive. A gentleman by the name of Robert Emenager, who spent his whole life saying the moon landings are real and his whole life saying aliens are real, you see. And he wrote in his own autobiography, he was at Cannon Air Force Base in 1968 for a classified reason. How about that? So we have triple verification that the guy was there, chief of security, and that's what happened. Now, why this isn't more breaking news, even in the alternative media, let's say pick two of the top podcasts. I think we know who those are.
Yeah.
They've never had me on the program to discuss this. That seems a bit odd. We have this breaking proof, somebody, an eyewitness, you know. I don't understand why. Because I believe, even though the JFK assassination list, which they say they knocked off 200 people to bury that truth, and of course 3,000 died on 9/11, regardless of who did 9/11, regardless of who killed Kennedy, they're still dead. But the moon landing fraud is a positive conspiracy. It's a positive lie. It's giving candy to a screaming child. During the Vietnam War, People were mad at the federal government, so they give them something to cheer about. President Johnson came up with the code name for the fake moon landing himself. He called it Operation Slam Dunk, meaning the way to guarantee its success was to fake it. If you fake it, you got a 100% guarantee you'll be successful. It's a slam dunk. And so taking that candy away from a baby and giving them a turd instead is going to get a big reaction out of them. And I think even though those other frauds and lies killed more people, this is the one that's going to upset the American public more. An NBC news director told me the very same thing. When I discovered the footage, I personally went to NBC News, personally in the news director's office, showed him the footage that I uncovered of them faking being halfway to the moon with a 1-foot model and a CIA telling him how to do it. He fell back in his chair, turned white, put his hand over his mouth and says, "Oh my gosh, they really didn't go to the moon. This absolutely proves it." I said, "Yeah, what are we going to do?" He thought about it and says, "I'm not going to broadcast it. I'm not going to go down in history as the man who caused the next American Civil War." And I'm thinking, okay, so you're afraid that if we expose the outrageous corruption of the federal government, the corrupt federal government would be brought to an end. Isn't that a good thing? Isn't that what's happening? And so I don't understand this. It's like there's a pedophile running loose. Well, he's a prominent person in society, and we don't want to upset his family and society, so we're just going to let him keep doing it. Come on. I don't understand why he was such a coward. And so 10 years go by. I show the same footage to the new news director at NBC News in New York City headquarters. They fly me there. They put me up in the Waldorf Astoria. They interview me. They say, "We're going to broadcast this nationwide special. The moon landings are fake. Here's the proof." They get a call from the federal government. "Don't do it. We'll pull your license. Don't do it." And they back down. That's what they told me. So all this is in the book and more, including my little CIA, adventures when I found this footage and literally being kidnapped and drugged with true serum to tell them where all the copies were and so forth and so on. I escaped their custody and I peed in a cup. I said, "I got them. I got true serum in me. I'm going to prove that I was drugged by the CIA because only they would have this drug, because I told them everything they wanted to know." So the idea that you have to waterboard somebody is just not true. So I pee in a cup. I give it to a friend to take to a lab in his name, not mine, thinking I can outwit the CIA. And a couple of days later, we meet, and he says, "Well, there was a problem at the lab." And I'm like, "Yeah, what happened?" He said, "Well, funny thing, they had a break-in over the weekend." And I said, "Yeah, so what?" He said, "Well, funny thing, the only thing stolen was your urine sample."
Oh my gosh. Wow.
I guess they overheard me. And yeah, we were talking outside at a park. I thought it was audio secure, and he kept warning me, talk softer, talk softer. I'd never heard of laser microphones, but this guy, knew people in the White House. Okay. And he knew about stuff like that. So when you have a millionaire and people like this behind you, you get access to the White House, and you get, documents to chief of staff of people. I know for a fact that the chief of staff of a particular administration knows that the moon landings are fake, right? And so, but they were afraid that it was too much for the people to handle. We'll deal with it later. We'll sweep it under the rug for another 4 years. And then they weren't there in another 4 years, you see? So you can't keep denying you have cancer. You're going to get sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker and then die. And if you believe in a biblical point of view, it's interesting that in 2017, there was an eclipse that fell over the largest pagan statue in the United States of America. And a biblical 7 years later, the eclipse is going to fall over Dallas, Texas, the point of no return for the corrupt federal government. You see, many generals wanted to stop Hitler, but the Nazi bureaucracy was too powerful for even 12 generals to stop. And I believe once the government killed their own president because he was going to get rid of their corruption, hope is gone except for divine intervention. And so it's 7 years between these two eclipses over the point of no return in Dallas and over the largest pagan statue. Now, from the book of Revelation, it says plagues come to encourage people to repent of their sin. And it goes on to say, but most people didn't repent. So I believe this is a 7-year probationary period for the United States of America. And I also believe they're not going to repent. The government's not going to become honorable. And therefore, flee the Titanic while lifeboats are available, is my opinion. So that's the sad truth of the world that we live in. We live in a fallen world, and how ironic that the greatest accomplishment of mankind is a complete lie. How about that? And then Nixon, knowing they were not on the moon, had the guts to say on national TV, putting a man on the moon is the greatest event since creation.
Wow.
When he knew they weren't there.
Yeah,
see the rebuke that's going to come here.
Mm-hmm.
Careful.
And I like how you brought it back with the sevens too.
Yeah, so you can hunker down in America. That's one way of doing it, with your beans and shotgun. Or you might find another place that is more suitable, for living, where the dollar goes farther and maybe the culture is used to an occasional rolling blackout, right?
Mm-hmm.
And harvesting their own food or fish. I don't know if you know about the Deagle report and projections of populations for the year 2025. Europe and America don't show favorable populations. In less than 2 years, suddenly the number of people who aren't there anymore are coincidentally equal to the number of people who got a particular medicine for an illness they didn't have. What a coincidence. And in the Asian and Spanish-speaking countries, which got a different medicine, those countries, the Pentagon report shows population going up, you see, because they don't demand gun rights, freedom rights, speech rights, you see. Keep those, and they're cheap labor too. So keep those people around, get rid of the complainers we have to deal with all the time. See?
Always look where it's least obvious. I've been doing magic for 20 years, and that's the one thing. In the last probably 10 years, that's when I actually started, I want to say, to think for myself, I guess is the right way to put it. But that's where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna watch, listen to one person from the left. I'm gonna watch and listen to one person from the right. I'm gonna see where they connect, what's familiar, what's common, and then where they different. And that's where I'm gonna look, because it's crazy how you can have two sides and everybody is stupid. Politicians, I don't know when we started to give so much trust into them. I don't get it.
Well, I mean, yeah, the last chapter of my book is what to do about this mess. And one of the suggestions is to not elect public officials, to have them chosen by lottery, which is the way the first democracy did it about 2,000 years ago. And so if a lottery selected jury can decide life or death, I think they're qualified enough to decide whether to put GMO labeling on a bottle of ketchup, which, by the way, 90% of Americans agreed they wanted, and it wasn't done. The president vetoed it, you see? So a democracy is supposed to be 51% get to have their way, but 90% cannot have their way. 90% wanted GMO labeling, and they could not get it in this alleged democracy, which is really slavery in disguise. And one of the biggest misdirections is politics. The Bible says a soldier of Christ does not get involved in civilian affairs. There's nothing more civilian than politics. There should be a law that says if a politician promises to do something and then elected and doesn't do it, or promises not to do something and then elected and does it, number one, they're immediately kicked out of office, and number two, they go to jail for 10 years. why that's not a law just dumbfounds me. Or
Because
the
they make the
idea,
laws.
yeah, the idea that the president or CEO of FDA who approves medicine can be the former CEO of a medicine manufacturing company, or that they leave and become the CEO of a medical manufacturing company with all their contacts. Why that should be completely illegal. And so should presidential appointments of all the department heads in the government. They should not be appointed by the president, because many honorable people in the FBI want to prosecute this crime, and they're told don't do it. They're friends of ours. If you do it, you're fired. You see, the FBI rank and file knows who's honest. Let them elect their leader. You see, and let the Justice Department, the FDA, and all those people elect their own leaders. They should not be by presidential appointment. There should be one term limit for all offices in the country: sheriff, mayor, council person, governor, whatever. One term, end of story. And choose Congress and the Senate by lottery. You have minimal qualifications, no felony in the last 7 years,
Yeah.
at least 20 years old or whatever. And then from that, let's say they nominate 7 people for president, and those people debate, the public votes. You narrow it down to to maybe 3, and then 2, and then 1, and that would be the way to do it. You're still voting for the president, but it's among a pool that was chosen by. There's no control over who becomes president anymore. You see, and there's virtually no corruption, no election problems or whatever, because you don't have to pay back favors for getting into office. You're chosen by lottery, and you have a 1-term limit. So there you go. And so things like that need to be initiated when people find out how corrupt the federal government is, because the first document of our country is not the Constitution. It's the Declaration of Independence. And it says, when any government becomes destructive of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. We have the right to get rid of the corrupt government. It's right there in writing. First document, signed by everybody, right? So the second to the last chapter of my book, Moon Man, which is at Sibreel.com, in audio that I read, Kindle or print, is called NASA's Greatest Fear. Because, Bradley, it'd be one thing if they faked the moon landing and didn't kill anybody. You kind of, maybe it's wrong as a Christian, have a little kind of admiration for them. They tunneled from the dry cleaner into the vault and got the gold. Good for them. But if they kill 3 guards who have wives and children in the process, you don't have any respect for them anymore, you see. And that's what's the problem, because there were things that I knew that I did not put in my film. A funny thing happened on the way to the moon, because the relatives of dead Apollo astronauts acknowledged it was true. They're the one who told me this stuff, but said they're pursuing their own legal course of action. Wait until I'm dead. Put it in your book. So I did. And so one of these is the confession of a widow of an Apollo astronaut who I interviewed for 4 hours. And I interviewed her son for 3 hours, who's a 747 pilot, not an idiot. And they both said with 100% certainty their father and husband, who would have been the first man to walk on the moon, was murdered by the CIA. Because on January 26, 1967, he came home from work and said, "Hon, for some strange reason, the CIA is all over the launch pad at NASA. I wonder why. Never saw him here before." Very next day, the guy's dead. They have forensic evidence from the spacecraft that accident was set intentionally, which means our tax dollars, a third of our labor, not only did we pay to be deceived about the moon landing, we paid CIA agents' salaries to murder our neighbors for exposing their crimes. So the government has become destructive of life. They murdered Virgil, Gus Grissom, Ed White, Roger Chaffee, 100% fact. They murdered their own people. The federal government did. Not to mention Kennedy. Not to mention the Gulf of Tonkin lie, which Robert McNamara said was made up, which led to the death of 58,220 Americans. You see? So they're already clearly being destructive of life. Then liberty. You have to ask permission to open your business, permission to ride your bicycle, permission to go to the beach. People being dragged off in handcuffs because they're at the beach when an alleged, illness is going around. They're not my parents, and the federal government, they're not my owners. If one person can tell another person that they cannot go to the beach and they cannot open their business, then one is a master and one is a slave. But it's supposed to be public servants. The government employees are public servants. No, they're masters. They tell us what to do, when to do, what we can do, what we can't do, and they're people just like us. Slavery's illegal, right?
Yeah.
So if you have to ask permission to open your business from somebody else, then you're a slave. I don't care if 1 out of 4 people are dropping dead. It is your decision whether to risk to open your business under such circumstances. And it is your decision whether to risk going out and shopping at that business under those circumstances. You can advise, you can say, maybe it's not a good idea. Maybe taking this medicine is a good idea. And maybe, wearing a handkerchief over your face is a good idea. You can decide for yourself. If seatbelts work, I don't have to wear a safety belt to make your safety belt work better. Right. And if this medicine protects me from an illness, I don't have to force everybody else to get it. If I'm right, then let them kill themselves.
Yeah.
I'll just be proven all the more right. You see? So what happened to freedom? What happened to liberty? So first, life. They're murdering their own people. Crystal clear, multiple times. Liberty. We have no more freedom. We can't get a GMO label on a bottle of ketchup when 90% of Americans agreed on something. Still cannot happen, right? You cannot open your business. You cannot walk to work. You cannot ride your bike. You cannot go to the beach. That's slavery, not freedom. So they're taking liberty away. Pursuit of happiness. What if it's my joy to open my business? They're robbing me of that joy. Do you realize they said you can't have this wedding at a hotel? You can't have your wedding. You cannot have your wedding. The government told somebody they can't have their wedding. They're destroying the pursuit of happiness. Who are you? What's special about you that you can tell me not to have my wedding? Who are you? We're all equal. All equal. Says so. They're in writing.
Yeah.
Right? So they're destroying life. They're destroying liberty. They're destroying the pursuit of happiness. When is it going to stop? When? Tick tock, tick tock. If a bank robber robs a bank, gets away with $1 million, next time he goes for 2. Next time he goes for 10. They got away with killing Kennedy. They got away with the Gulf of Tonkin. They got away with the moon landing. They got away with 9/11. They got away with what's going on for the last 3 years. They're just getting better and better and better. Is anyone going to stand up to these people? We're going to die anyway.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to lose your property anyway. Why not do it standing up for what's right? I mean, come on. This is it. This is critical time here, folks. It's now or never. So I don't know what to say. The U.S., I call it the United Titanic of America. And it is so corrupt, it would boggle people's minds. And this is why the moon landing fraud is the linchpin. It's the finger out of the dike, in my opinion. This is why I'm suspicious that certain podcasts have not had me on to reveal this new groundbreaking eyewitness testimony that could pull the finger out of the dike. Maybe they don't want the finger out of the dike. You see? Now, if I'm making millions of dollars a year and someone says, cook hamburgers, I'm not going to say no. I'm going to cook French fries.
Yeah.
Sure, for my millions. So maybe they're told not to have certain guests on or not to talk about certain things that we don't know about. We don't know what their contracts are. Most of those contracts say you can't share your contract. You know what I mean? It's a non-disclosure. You can't reveal what's in the contract. It has to be a secret. So I don't know what's going on, but I do know. I mean, just imagine this, Bradley. Imagine this right now. Your phone's ringing off the hook. Mine's ringing. You're getting a tap on your shoulder from your wife. I'm sorry to interrupt. It's important. And
I think I lost you. Are you still there? We'll give it just another couple of minutes. We lost Bart, but thank you for coming on the Fandemic. You can tweet at me if you want to get a hold of me. You can tweet at me at Fandemic 3. You can message me on Facebook at the Fandemic. I'm also active on TikTok at Fandemic 1. Oh, wait, he's back. Here we go.
There we go. So my
Ah,
point is, what if right now we're having this leisure conversation? We both get, frantic people around us. They say, you got to stop. You got to turn on the TV. So we turn on the TV. It's Buzz Aldrin tearfully confessing, I'm sorry. The moon missions were fake. I'm sorry. There would be dead silence like that throughout the world. Wow. You know what it would be like, Bradley? It would be like getting a cold glass of water thrown in your face, or dare I say, bucket of cold water.
yeah.
And you realize I was asleep. Wow. I was asleep. I was sleepwalking. And then you look down and you're 1 foot away from a cliff. That's what it would be like. That's why they're so concerned that the moon landing fraud will come out. Because even though it killed fewer people than, the JFK witness list, Gulf of Tonkin lie, 9/11 lie, it's the one that will upset people the most to bring about new government, necessary government, new rules. I think there should be a new constitutional convention. And we need to go back to simplicity. I mean, when you read the Constitution, it's like 1 or 2 sentences for these profound laws. The government will not establish or prohibit the free exercise of religion. Move on to the next one. But they closed churches because of illnesses. That's breaking the Constitution, isn't it right there?
Yeah.
You see, I did a statistical study. The odds of dying in a car crash on the way to church and the odds of dying from an illness you catch at church. You're much more likely to die driving a car. So we have to make cars illegal. And you can't open churches until people walk there, right? Because we're here to protect people, right? The government is not our nanny. They're not our parent. They're our servant. They're certainly not our masters, and yet they've become. And it's like the frog in a boiling pot. They just became more tyrannical, and generation after generation. It's just the way that it is, I guess, but we're told we're free. Complete lie. We're told we have the best health care in the world. But guess what? If you remove statistically heart disease and cancer, guess what the number 1 cause of death is in America? Medical malpractice. Kills 500,000 people a year that they admit to, right?
Wow.
70% of Americans are taking prescription medicine. So what does that mean? Well, it means 70% of Americans are sick. If there's a country in the world that has 70% of the population sick all the time, that country has the worst health care in the world. You see, 70% of the population is sick all the time in a healthcare system. That has to be the worst healthcare in the world. And we're told the exact opposite is the best. And even statistically, after heart disease and cancer are taken out of the equation, medical malpractice kills more people than anything else. It boggles the mind. And you can prove it by 70% and yet we're told the exact opposite. We're told we're more free than any other society, and we're more enslaved than any other society. Permission to open your business, permission to go to church, permission to go to the beach. And we're enslaved in other ways. We're enslaved in spiritual ways. I ask all of you, go to your favorite restaurant and walk around and look. 90% of the people there who traveled some distance to go to this great place to have fellowship with these people in person, 90% of them have their faces in their phone. All 4 at the table, all 4 have their faces in their phones. They're not having fellowship with the people they came to have fellowship with. That's slavery, you see? And we don't even know it. That's dangerous. Let me tell you something while we're got a little time left. Praying mantises are fascinating, and they're super intelligent. They'll look right at you. They'll go like, kind of freaky, super smart. So if you read a scientific book from 5 years ago or before, it said they're cannibals. They eat each other, and so they're kind of weird, and the reason why they came to that conclusion is because what they would do is they get a room and let's say with 50 10-gallon aquariums with a wire lid on top and throw, a bunch of praying mantises in each one, and they'd eat each other, right? And then about 5 years ago, some scientist says, hey, why don't we study them in the wild instead of in these little containers? And so he goes out and he films them in the wild, and they never eat each other. The insect is so intelligent. When it's confined, when its freedom is taken away, it goes crazy. And I saw this during these, quote, LOCKDOWNS, people stress level. They were going crazy because they're put in an unnatural state. Look, a particular country I know of has a lot of their dogs in cages everywhere. People own dogs and they're in cages. When they have, not a huge yard, but a completely fenced in yard, they don't even let them run. They're in cages. Monkeys in cages, dogs in cages. And I'm just like, just hurts my heart to see it. And I look at the animals, they're walking in circles, walking in circles, walking in circles, walking in circles. And then when they come out, they will bite anybody who's not their owner. And when they're free, everybody's their friend. And the monkey rocking back and forth like this because it's supposed to be free. It's going crazy. The dog went crazy, snapping at everybody, you see? And when we're not having fellowship with one another, and we all have our faces in the phone, it's not interesting. It's not quirky. It's dangerous. And we might not even know how dangerous that is for the human mind, like putting that praying mantis in a cage. We're in a mental cage. We're living in an artificial reality when we have our minds attached to a screen that is not real. You see? If we're across from each other at a table and I'm like this, you're real, this is not. And yet my mind is consumed throughout the day with something that's not real. It's not here. And that's how I base my emotions. I'm a layman preacher. I preach to a bunch of teens, and they're like, many of us suffer from anxiety. I'm like, teenagers having anxious, no rent to pay,
Yeah.
No mortgage, no job. Why are they anxious? You never heard anybody before 1990, teenagers being anxious. Never heard such a thing. Never heard of ADD or whatever, and because it wasn't there, it didn't exist. Something changed. Something started making children crazy because they're living and their mind is in an artificial world when it's supposed to be in the real world, and it's making them go crazy, making them anxious, making them suicidal, and so forth. And then when you long for fresh air to go to the beach and you're told, don't do it, we'll arrest you, it causes this insanity, this frustration. And so we have double insanity screws on us. And that needs to change, or something bad's going to happen. It's already started. The disease has already started. Can it be stopped or not? I don't know. So
obedience. It makes you obedient, and that's exactly what the point is.
I saw a video on YouTube, and I'll try to find it and maybe use it sometime. But it was like a candid camera thing, which I always liked as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, it was some office, dentist office, doctor's office. Nothing major like emergency room, like foot doctor, thing. And everybody was in on the act except one person. The staff was in on the act, and all the people in the quote waiting room, they were in on the act except one person. So the new person comes in, they sit down, a few minutes go by, and there's a beep over the intercom, not too loud, like beep. Everyone stands up for about 5 seconds and then sits down. And then a couple of minutes go by and there's a beep, beep. Everyone stands up, and so the new person stands up with them and then sits down. And then they do it again. Beep. Everybody stands up, including the new person, sits down. Then all the people leave except the new person. New people come in, probably part of the act too. And it beeps, and this person stands up and sits down. They have no clue why they're doing it. They're just doing it because everyone else is doing it, because they're told to do it. I mean, me, I don't know, am I different? I instantly ask. I instantly get up and go to the counter, or probably first to the person beside me. What the heck is going on? What is this beep thing? You know what I mean? And I would get to the bottom of it, or until I did. I would just keep going until I relentlessly found out what was happening. You know, this is journalism. For example, I think it was like 2003, the Republican Party, changed their logo ever so slightly. And it was the guy from Reality Check, Ben Swan, discovered this. And they fired him shortly thereafter. Can you believe it? So, and I have a picture of it somewhere. It's like a star, the star in the American flag. The point is at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And the Republican logo for all time until George Bush was president had the star, like 3 stars in the elephant, red, white, and blue, 3 stars pointing at the top. Then during their administration, they turned the stars about 20 degrees to where the star was pointing down, and 2 were like this, 2 like this, 1 down, which matches the satanic pentagram of the goat head. I mean, it was obviously intentional, and obviously somebody gave that order. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
A good reporter would call up the Republican Party and say, who does your logos? And they'd find the logo department, and they'd say, who gave you that order to do that change? Well, that came from so-and-so. You call them up. Did you do that? No, that came from so-and-so. Then you call them up. No, that came from so, and you keep working until you find out. Then it's like it came from the office of, Dick Cheney. Oh, now I get it. It was Dick Cheney who's doing this, Anyway. I guess we got to go soon. It's been our hour.
That's all right.
Yeah.
This has been so much fun chatting with you there, Bart. Go ahead one more time. Tell people where they can find you and how they can get all of your awesomeness.
I like that. Just go to Sibreel.com, Sibrel.com. You can get my book in audio, Kindle or print, and it'll go into great detail about why, unfortunately, the moon landings absolutely were faked. Not a theory, absolutely true. And then what does this mean? It means, this is a serious problem. We have these criminals at large and their offspring running our country in a deceitful, criminal way. They're gangsters. They're liars. And we're paying them to kill our brethren who are trying to expose their crime. Not my theory. What I was told by the dead astronauts' relatives, who they say was murdered by the CIA. I just published what they told me in the book. So you can get the book, Moon Man, The True Story of a Filmmaker on the CIA Hit List at Sibrel.com.
Awesome. And you can tweet at me at Fandemic3, message me on Facebook at The Fandemic. Also active on TikTok. Usually I just put clips of the podcast out there. You can also hear my reviews and much, much more. If you want to support the show, there are several ways to do so. You can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/thefandemic. On the next episode, I will either toast you or roast you, depending on several factors. You can also go to Patreon at patreon.com/PVOTN Fandemic. Become an episode assistant, an episode producer, a pre-venge producer like Stacy, or yes, you could be part of the Council of Nerds, starting at $5 a month. You can just share the show with someone you want to make a little more awesome. Don't forget to buy my books on Amazon, as the Leveling Up My Awesome and the Stuffed Animal Night Force versus the Dream Invaders. Leave me a 5-star review. Now, there, Bart, I like to end every episode on a positive note. What are your words of wisdom?
Gee, I don't think I have any words of wisdom, but I'll try. I'll tell you what I'm learning. Well, the Bible says love covers over a multitude of sins. And the main thing that I'm trying to share with other alternative media people is whoever we view as the Hitlers of our day, they're really not our enemy. Okay. The one teaching of Jesus that makes me know he's not from earth is he said, love your enemy. The Jews are bombing the Muslims are bombing the Jews, and the so-called Christian America is bombing everybody else. So Jesus says, if you only love people who love you and hate people who hate you, you're no different than pagan non-believers, you see. So the key teaching, to me, the core teaching of Jesus is love your enemy. It says in Ephesians 6, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, not against the Hitlers of our day. It's against the spiritual forces of evil that control them. For example, certain people, well, let's mention them by name. Bill Gates, okay? His parents were racist. So they brought him up from the cradle to be a racist. And for all we know, they were highly abusive, emotionally or physically or both. And so his state of mind has a lot to do with that. And we should see him as a lost person. And as you could say, a person with an illness. And so he's not our enemy. He deserves our prayers. And we should really feel sorry for him rather than mad at him. Because the Bible says, what good is it to gain the whole world and forfeit your soul? And these criminals who are running the world looks like they're going to gain the world, but they won't make it to the other side. And, the victims will, in my opinion. So we only have to hold on a little bit longer. The end is in sight, but we do have to remain faithful to the end. Jesus said to the church, the love of most believers will grow cold, Matthew 24:13. But only those who hold to the very end will be saved. So the end is in sight. We have to hold on. And the main thing is just to love everybody. Love people who cut you off. Love people who are mad at you. Love people who take your stuff. Love people who wrong you. That's what it says. Bless those who curse you. If someone wants to strike you on one cheek, let them strike you again. And that's why I didn't sue who when I was tempted to do so to buy a house. I was like, oh, I can buy a house. I'll just sue them. I'll win so easily. Then immediately, the moment I had that thought, turn the other cheek. I'm like, oh, darn it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Have to earn a house another way.
Right. Oh, well, that's better than what I'm gonna say. I like to say this. We're all playing the same game in life, just on a different level. You're welcome for leveling up your awesome, live free, or die empty. If you think about it, every time you feel stupid, you just got a little smarter. And never forget, squirrels' cheeks are also their nutsacks. Have a great day.